and today I'm going to be showing you how to make this cardigan, this daisy cardigan. This is not a beginner's pattern. It's relatively easy and simple, but I would not recommend doing it as your first few knitting projects. Make sure you get comfortable with knitting first. Second of all, I'm not gonna be showing you the basics of knitting, kind of the same thing, but you need to know how to knit, purl, cast on, cast off, other basics like that. If you don't know how to do it and you've done a few knitting projects, you can just look it up on YouTube. But I just wanted to let you know that I'm not going to be showing you those things. Also, the flowers here are made using a color working technique called intarsia. I'm going to show you how to do this, and if it's your first time doing intarsia, that's totally fine. These flowers are relatively simple, so they'll be great for your first time project. Also, this video should work for all sizes. It's going to be a lot easier if you're the same size as me, because I'm going to be telling you how many rows and how many stitches you should be casting on and everything like that, so you just do exactly what I'm doing. If you are below an extra small or above a large and above, I'm going to be showing you how you can use your own measurements to get the stitch count and the row count and the measurements that you need, but I'm not going to be giving you the exact stitch numbers, so sorry, I don't know how to calculate that. I'm trying to learn, but if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. So this is the yarn that I'm going to be using. I couldn't get good footage of the first thing, so it's the Bernat Soft Baby. It's baby yarn, and it's soft lilac, lemon, and white. And you need 2 of the soft lilac. And the knitting needles are size 5, 3.75 millimeters. So I'm going to show you how to get the measurements you need to make a sweater that works for your body. I'm a small medium, so if you are a large or above, an extra small or below, I would recommend using the measurements that work for your body, because this cardigan is supposed to be relatively tight. That's just the style, you know, so if it doesn't fit, it'll look a lot better if we use the measurements for your body type. So how we're going to get those measurements is starting with the front panels. So there's 2 front panels that are identical, just opposites. So how to get those is, I'm wearing a shirt right now that has a seam in it. So this is kind of where the seam approximately of our cardigan is going to go. So starting off, I'm going to take a measuring tape. I would recommend using a measuring tape. If you don't have one, if you use a piece of yarn, it works too. You can't really use a ruler because your body is not flat, or 2D, I should say. If you only have a ruler or only have a yardstick, what you can do is use a piece of yarn, go like that on your body, right, and then pull it flat against the ruler and it'll give you your measurements. You could also just keep the yarn as a measuring for how much you need to cast on or how much you need to knit. But ideally, with the measuring tape, what you're going to do is you're going to start where you want your sweater to begin. It's kind of a crop sweater, so I'm going to do it around where my belly button is, maybe a little bit lower from these pants. So where the seam is, I'm just going to go down and I'm going to measure it like that. It's about 9 inches to where my belly button is, which theoretically is center. I'm going to add an extra inch because it's not, my tight against my skin is different than a tight cardigan. And you can see it's the same for the other side, so it should be symmetrical. So we're going to do 10 inches from each one of the panels. And for the height of the panel, I'm just going to take it, and the widest part of my body, I guess, is here. So I'm going to go like this, where the top I want it, so the top of my shoulder. So that's around 23 inches. So that's how tall our cardigan the front panel is going to be. And it should be the same for the other side. Exactly the same. So it's going to be 10 by 23 inches tall. And depending on how, you can just follow what I'm doing, but you should probably also mark where you want to go in. So if you want your sweater to have a deeper neckline or a shallower neckline, where you want it, I want it about here, maybe 12, 13 inches. So that's what I'm going to do. And that's where I'm going to start to decrease. And I'm going to show you how to do that, of course. But just so I have a measurement of where I want to decrease. That's good for the front panels. Okay, so for the back panel, basically it's going to be twice what the front panels are. So if I did 10 inches and 10 inches, it's going to be 20 inches. I mean, you can double check just to make sure, but mine's around 20 inches, right? And maybe I'm going to do a little bit less because we added that extra inch. Maybe I'm going to do my 19 inches, 18 inches, but depending on what your body and the height you want it. And for the height of the back panel, what we're going to do is, it should also be the same, ideally, if where you connect the panels is exactly in the middle, but just to be sure, we're going to measure it like that, and 19 inches. So, actually a bit less, because these aren't on your back. So 19, 20 inches for the back. So it's pretty much going to be a square. Okay, done back panel. Okay, so for the sleeves, what I'm going to start with is I'm going to measure the cuffs, I guess, with my hands, and I'm going to see how big those are. It's around 6 inches, but we do want to make sure that you can get it over your hand. It's going to be out of a stretchy material because we're going to do a rib stitch, but I'm going to add an inch, so around 7 inches, and then I'm going to measure the length of my arms. So you should probably have someone do this, but I'm holding it in my hand, so it's going to start at 7 inches, and I'm just going to measure all the way to the top. When it's bent, because you want to go over your shoulder, like that, and it is 32 inches for me. But whatever your measurements for you, you should write down all these measurements, and as you're knitting, they're going to be useful. Your sleeve is from your cuff, so right here, that's 4 inches there, to your armpit, right there. You can close it. If it's baggy like that, you want it to be tight. So just up at the start, like that, and like 24 inches, so less than over your shoulder. And you'll see why you need that measurement once you start the sleeve. But just make sure to write all these measurements down so you have them when you need them. Okay, so the other measurement you need to take for one of the front panels is, shape is kind of be like this, then it's going to go in a little bit, which allows the sleeves to attach nicely without it bunching. So to know where we're going to start going in, we're going to measure from here to your armpit, right here. But I'm going to make sure to put the wires apart, across, like that, 15 inches. Okay, so for the front panel, you're going to cast on 58 inches. And then you're going to knit one side purl and one side knit. So I'm starting with the purl side, because in theory, when you're casting on, it's a knit stitch, but it doesn't really matter what side you start on as long as you make sure to alternate. So I'm going to do one side purl and then flip it over and do the other side knit. And like this forever. This is called stockinette stitch, and that's the only type of knitting that we're going to be doing this whole time. I would recommend using a row counter or a knitting counter. You could get an app on your phone or your computer that's just the same thing as a click counter, or you can go on specially for knitting. It'll help you keep track of everything. Okay, so what I'm doing is, this is called intarsia, and basically what it is each knit stitch is one little square on the grid. So as you can see, I knit 3 white stitches because there's 3 white grid squares, and then there's 3 purple ones, and then 3 white ones again. You'll see them when I knit them. The most important thing to do is when you change colors to twist the yarn. So you're going to make a little twist the colors together. As you can see, I'm doing right here. And that will make sure that it's secure. If you do not do this, it's going to be full of holes. Okay, so I finished that row, and now on the way back I'm purling. So I already did most of it leading up to the flower, and purling, it's going to be the same thing, you're just reading it in the other direction. So instead of left to right, you're going to read it right to left, and that's how you're going to do it. Okay, so I've done several rows, and now I'm going to show you how I add in the yellow. It is the same thing pretty much, just take yellow, I twist it together, and I do just the bottom yellow part is just 2 stitches, so that's it. And then I take the white, and again, I'm going to twist it together. Make sure you do that. When you're deciding where to put the flowers, think about it like you're making a print. So you want the flowers to be random. You can do half flowers on the edge, and if you're worried about it, you can do a little sketch of your sweater and map them out. Okay, so you're gonna knit 92 rows, or around, I think it's 12 inches, or 11 inches, and then we're gonna start the decrease. To decrease, instead of knitting 1, you're just going to knit 2 together, like I have here. So you're going to put the knitting needle 2 through, hoop stitches, whatever, at the same time, and that's it. Then you're going to knit the rest of the row, purl on the way back, and you're going to purl on the other side, like there. I'm going to purl, and so you're dropping a stitch each row, but on the same side. So you're just gonna be decreasing from one side, there, like that. Okay, so for the hemline, we're going to decrease 22 stitches in total. So that's 22 rows. And now we're going to work on the armhole. So we need this to make sure that the sleeve fits properly and you get this nice fitted look. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to drop a stitch one side by knitting 2 together. And then I'm just going to knit the rest of the row as normal and drop a stitch when I get to the hemline. And you're going to decrease 10 stitches. So you're going to do this for 10 rows. Okay, so once you are done with the 22 rows of the neckline and the 10 rows of the armhole, you're just going to knit 44 rows in total, plain, simple. You're not doing anything but knitting on one side, pulling it to the other side, and then you're going to cast off. Okay, now you're going to do the exact same thing another time for the other front panel. The only difference is the armhole and the neckline are going to be switched, so they're going to be opposite because your arms are not, on the same side. Okay, now we're going to do the back, and you're going to cast on 105 stitches. For the back, you're going to do exactly the same thing, stockinette stitch, knitting on one side, purling on the other side, and the flower print is the same. Space it out, make it even. And you're going to knit 145 rows of this. Okay, now we're going to do the sleeves, and the sleeves are the trickiest part, but personally I think they're the most fun part because, they're interesting. So we're going to start off by casting on 44 stitches. Okay, so the edge we're going to do a ribbing, which is going to be knit 2, purl 2. So you're going to knit 2 stitches and then flip your yarn over and purl 2 stitches. And you can do this for the whole length of the knitting, and you're going to, on the back, you're going to do the opposite. So where you knit 2, you're going to purl 2. Where you purl 2, you're going to knit 2. Once you're done with the ribbing, it should measure 1 inch, and we're going to increase 2 stitches, 1 on each end. To increase a stitch, first you're going to knit 1, and then you're going to pick up the string that's kind of in between those 2 stitches, and you're going to put your needle through the back of it and knit a stitch. And that's exactly how you pick up a stitch. And now we're going to knit to the end of the row and do that again on the other side. Once you're at the end of the row, you're going to pick up another stitch, and you're doing that. Once there's 1 stitch left on your needle, you're going to again find the little string that's in between. You're going to pick it up and knit a stitch. Then you're going to knit 38 regular rows where you're not increasing and you're not decreasing, you're just knitting regular, like that. Once we've knit 38 regular rows, what you're going to do is you're going to increase a stitch every 6 rows. So every time you hit the 6th row, you're going to increase 2 stitches actually in total, 1 on each side. So 1 at the beginning and 1 at the end, just like we did before. If you're doing a different size than me, anything other than a smaller or medium, I'm going to show you how often you should increase your stitches on the screen. Okay, to show you, we have 1 left on the hook, and we're going to pick up the little string in between, and we're going to knit into the back of it, just like that. And that will increase 1 stitch. Okay, so we're going to do that for 130 rows, or until it measures to where your armpit is. What you're going to do now is you're going to cast off 4 stitches on each side. To do this, cast off, and then you're going to knit a full row. Okay, once you've done knitting that row, you're going to turn it over to the purl side and you're going to cast off 4 stitches there. So just like you did before, but this side purling. Okay, so now you've finished purling that row. You're going to turn it around for the knit side and we're going to be decreasing stitches, and we want it to go the right way so it doesn't look messy. So what you're going to do is you're going to slip 2 off from the back. So you can put the needle in the back and then you're going to put them back on the needle and then you're going to knit them together. And then you're going to knit the rest of the row like normal, and when you get to the other side you're gonna knit 2 together and then knit 1. So you're gonna wait until you have 3 stitches left on your hook and, or not hook, sorry, needle, and then you're gonna knit 2 together and then knit 1 more. Okay, so you're going to turn around and you're going to purl the other side. You're not going to do anything but purling. And you're going to do this knitting, decreasing 2 in total on the knit side and purling on the purl side until you have 26 stitches left on your needle, and then you're going to cast off. Okay, yay, we're done with the knitting part. This is what all the pieces look like. Just lay down, ignore my feet. And now we're gonna get on to the finishing the ends and sewing. Okay, so what we're going to do is sew in the ends of all the flowers and everything else. All you need is a needle that can fit your yarn. That's it. It doesn't really matter what type of needle. You know, maybe it's a little better to have it pointed, but even if it is the flat needle at the end, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to go in, making sure not to make the yarn show through the other side, and I'm just going to kind of weave it in a little bit, and then I'm going to pull it through a little bit tighter than it needs to be, and I'm going to cut it. So pulling it through a little bit tighter, and then once I cut it, I'll kind of loosen the knitting again, and the end will be hid. So you're just going to do that for all the ends. I know it might take a while. If you don't really care how the inside looks, you could just tie a knot and cut off the ends, but this makes it look a bit more professional. Okay, so I'm going to line up the front panels along the back, and I'm doing this inside out because I think it makes the outside look a little bit better. The edge of my top of the shoulder part should be touching the edge of the back. To sew it in, you're just going to take the same needle as before, preferably sharp for this one, and the light purple thread. And I'm just kind of going over. Ignore that, I couldn't decide which direction I wanted to go in. But I'm just going through the top, making sure they're lined up perfectly. And I'm pulling pretty tightly. You don't want to pull tight enough that the yarn snaps, but you want to pull relatively tightly. The tighter you pull, the less you'll be able to see the thread from the other side. So I'm pulling relatively tightly. Okay, so I'm going to line up the bottom of the front panel and the bottom of the back. It doesn't matter if the front is a little bit shorter than the back. And you're going to sew along the side, just like we did before. Now, with the sleeve. So the sleeve is probably the trickiest part to attach. But so you have your kind of armhole, and because the front is a bit shorter than the back, we're just going to fold it. So ignoring the seam, we're going to fold it so that it's even. And just to get the middle of the top part, I'm folding it in half, just as kind of like a measurement thing instead of measuring it. And making sure again that they're both insides facing up, because we don't really want to see this. I'm sort of going to line up the pieces, and I'm going to sew along just like I did before. And if you want, you can pin this in place as you're sewing it or before you want to sew it. That's not really necessary, but if you want to do that, that's fine. Okay, sorry. No, it's fine. So what you're going to do on both sides, but sorry I didn't have the footage of it in the first side, you're going to match up those 4 that you cast off with the little bit that you didn't sew up completely, and you're just going to sew along like you did normally with the sleeve, making sure that those are matched up. And once you're done with that section, what you're going to do is just sew down the sleeve. You know, make sure that it's unset out. You're just going to sew that stitch you've been doing all along, all the way down the sleeve, and then you're done sewing it up. So we're done with the sweater, right? We've sewn it all together. You want to make sure to try it on, make sure it fits. So I think it looks pretty good so far. The only problem is it rolls. So as you can see, all the ends are rolled, and the top part is rolled. So we're gonna fix that. The reason why this happens is when you're knitting stockinette stitch, it'll just happen naturally. It's not your fault. There's nothing you can really do to prevent it. I mean, there's some things, depending on what yarn you use or other things, you could make it better, but it's fine. We're gonna fix it. So the reason why this happens is because the one side is the knit stitch and one side is the purl, right? And on the same stitch, one side is shorter than the other, so it'll just naturally curl like this. This doesn't happen with regular plain knitting where you knit both sides, because it kind of balances each other out. One side, the front's longer than the other, and then the other side vice versa, so it creates this flat, even place. But because here, as you can see, the knit side of the stitch is shorter than the purl side of the stitch, and here the width, right, the knit side of the stitch is wider than the purl side, it's just going to curl like that naturally. But I'm going to show you how to do it. We're going to do a technique called blocking, and what you need is a towel, a flat surface, and some water. See here, I have my water in a relatively big bowl, and I have a towel which is laid down on my desk. And of course I have my knitting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my water and I'm gonna take all of my knitting, and this is cold water because we don't want the colors to run. Even though they're relatively light, we do have white, so, and I'm just gonna put my knitting in here. It's kind of a small bowl, not gonna lie, but we can get it all soaked. Okay, now that it's soaked, I'm gonna make sure there's no dry spots. Probably should have used a bigger bowl, but okay. I'm gonna lift it up and I'm gonna gently kind of squeeze the water out. I'm not gonna wring it because I don't want it to stretch. I'm just gonna gently squeeze the water out. I'm doing this on my desk, but if you have a surface that you really care about, that you don't want to get wet at all, you can put a trash bag or something down underneath your towel because it might bleed through a little bit. Okay, put my bowl on the floor. Now I'm gonna take my knitting and I'm gonna spread it out. The sleeves I don't really care about because they're good. They don't have any edges that we need to make sure are not curled. But the back, I'm just gonna uncurl the edges. And the thing with this kind of sets the knitting, so you want to make sure that you're not like putting in a weird position where one arm is stretched out and the other one's scrunched up. You want to make sure everything's kind of nice and even. Now you can pin this in place if you want to. I am not going to, but... So you're just going to leave it there until however long it takes to dry. I left mine overnight, but you don't need to do that, just as long as it takes. Now we're going to add the buttons. I'm just lining up my sweater cardigan right now, just to make sure that it's even and deciding which side I want to be on top. And then you can use whatever buttons you want. I got these buttons off of an old men's shirt, but any type you want is totally fine. I would recommend small and white, but it's just a personal preference. And I'm just going to line these up loosely around where I want it so I get a good idea of how far apart I want them. And I put my buttons 2.5 inches apart. And because I want the buttons to appear on the other side when it's closed, I'm going to sew them onto the other front panel. To sew them on, I'm going to use a white thread and just a regular sewing needle. This needs to be able to go through the holes in your buttons, so it needs to be pretty small. And to sew on a button, all you have to do is just go in and out of the holes, as many as there are. Okay, now you're just going to go in and out many times. So into one hole, into the other, and then out. Once you're done, you can just tie the two ends of the string together really tight, maybe do a few knots, and then just cut them off. Once you're done with the buttons, we now need to do the buttonholes. So what you're going to do is you're going to line up where you think the buttonhole should go with your button, and then you're just going to kind of force your button through the fabric / knitting or whatever. If you have a small button, this works great. If you have a bigger button, it's a little bit more difficult. But there we go, look at that. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of make that hole a little bit better. Okay, so with my yarn needle again, and with purple yarn, I'm gonna make little loops on either side of the buttonhole to kind of stretch it out a little bit, to make it look more presentable and make the button easier to go in and out. Okay, I think this is it all done.